Well, hello there trainers, greetings, KuroBlitz here and welcome back to another video. Today I am here to discuss one amazing character from the Pokemon anime as a whole, basically Ash's greatest rival of all time, that being Paul of the Diamond and Pearl series. And after the Diamond and Pearl series, we don't see Paul for 12 years until the very end of Pokemon Journeys before the Masters 8 tournament of the World Coronation series, so that's 4 whole generations where we don't know where the guy is or what's he up to. And that's basically what I'm here to talk about. What was Paul doing until his return in the Generation 8 anime? Let's find out. Alright then, so we need to start where we left off Paul, and that is with the very beginning of the Best Wishes series in the Unova region, Pokemon Black and White. I'm going to interpret where Paul was at the very end of each American season, at least Lucy interpreted. So let's get started with, with Ash getting all of the 8 badges of Unova, that being episode 84 of the Unova series, and the very last one of Best Wishes season 1. I feel like during this time, Paul was doing the Battle Frontier in Kanto, and therefore finally defeating Brandon, so he went to Ash's home region where Ash left it to, go to the Unova region. And I feel like during this time, because Paul, is from Sinnoh, he would have, a bio Poke Radar or even sounds from, a Poke Gear because he's based off Silver, right? So I feel like during this time, it's when Paul would get a Gabite and a Metang, and these Pokemon would be the ones that, they would become the Garchomp and the Metagross that we do see in episode 114 of Pokemon Journeys. And they would be instrumental to, defeat Brandon in one way, shape or form. As for how he defeated Brandon and the other 6 Frontier Brains, let me know in the comment section down below what is your point of view on that matter. So there's that. As for the rest of Best Wishes, I feel like, for Season 2 and Season 2 Episode N, Paul returned to Sinnoh and he didn't stop his Frontier Challenge with only Kanto. I feel like he defeated, the 5 heads of, the Battle Zone of Sinnoh, those being of Dahlia, the Rock, Argenta, Thornton, and Palmer. And since the Battle Zone is more tropical and less frigid, I feel like Paul during this time, he probably caught some Pokemon that are wild there in the video games, and I feel like he finally caught a Fearow, and I would like to imagine Paul with a Banette. I think this would be a very fitting Pokemon for him. Now, as for where he was during Ash's detour in Decolor Islands, I feel like Paul was also in another archipelago. I feel like Paul was in the Sevi Islands with Brandon, helping him out, and I feel like Paul went to the Tanobi Chambers of the Sevi Islands, where there are a bunch of unknowns, so you have, the Creation Trio and more lore towards this Pokemon. And this would be not only the place where he gets the Gyarados that he uses against Ash, but I feel like he would get a Jinx as well. Given how he has Magmortar and Electivire, it would make sense for Paul to also capture a Jinx. It would be his second Yukiona Pokemon, given how he also got Frostlass. So there you have it. Paul's team during the course of Best Wishes, where he traveled to Kanto, the Battle Zone and the Sevi Islands, they would be Gabite, Metang, Fearow, Gyarados, Jinx, and Banette. I think this would be very fitting Pokemon for Paul to have, and given how he now learned from Ash, he's not that reluctant in just releasing the mons. Now he's really able to see everyone's potential. And speaking of everyone's potential, when it comes to the Kalos region and the X and Y saga of Pokemon, while Ash was in Kalos, I feel like Paul was a step behind, but a step further when it comes to, you know, both these aspects. The step behind being, I feel like Paul went to Unova, the region that Ash went prior. However, he traveled faster and with a lot more progress on his line. During the first season of X and Y, where Ash gets his third badge by defeating Corrin and Mega Lucario in Shalor City, I feel like Paul already had 4 badges and he was in Nimbasa, and he probably did some training in the Battle Subway because he wanted to get stronger. And during the course of this point in time, I feel like Paul caught Pokemon very powerful, those being of a Reuniclus and an Eelektross. They just feel like Paul Pokemon because, you know, it would be a Psychic type, it would be very fitting for him. If I recall correctly, he didn't have any Psychic types in the actual canon. And Eelektross, it's a Pokemon that has no weaknesses, so you know that Paul would want to capitalize on that aspect. Now when it comes to the next season of X and Y, that being Kalos Quest, it ends with Ash getting his 7th badge in Anastar, and I feel like it would end in Paul's side of the story with him getting his 8th gym badge, that being against Drayden. And as for Paul's Pokemon caught during this point in time, I feel like Paul would have had a Scolipede and a Shiny Emboar. Shiny Emboar will basically be, you know, a do-over of Infernape, so he learned from the mistakes that he did with Infernape and now apply that better for, you know, a Tepig becoming a very powerful Emboar. And I decided to give Paul a Scolipede because Ash has a Leavanny, a bug that evolves via friendship, while Paul would get, you know, the other bug that evolves via level up. It would be very fitting for his character. Now, when it comes to XYZ and the whole Kalos League and the Team Flare Crisis, I feel like Paul would be in the eastern side of the Unova region, and he would probably be on Cynthia's villa. He had probably trained with Cynthia there, and the Pokemon that I can see the dude catching are very unorthodox ones, but I feel like for his battle style they could fit like a glove. Those being of Cofagrigus and Watchog. These are not Pokemon that one would think that Paul would have, but I feel like that's because of that real aspect that he could make any Pokemon work. Like, the guy had a Ninjask. Realistically, he should have had a Shedinja, but he had a Ninjask, like Brandon, but it really didn't do much, but he tried to. That's the important part. So yeah, this would be Paul's Unova team during Ash's run in X and Y. Those being of Watchog, Cofagrigus, Scolipede, Emboar, Eelektross, and Reuniclus. And as for a side tangent, during those special episodes of The Legend of X, Y, and Z, where we have, you know, Alexa and Sycamore, I feel like Paul probably also learned something from Cynthia about, you know, the legends of Hisui and the Celestica people and in the Sinnoh region, and maybe he met Kogita. He could probably have met Kogita, or probably Paul was sent to the past to battle Volo, and if that's to be the case, I feel like Paul would have benefited from Pokemon like Hisuian Braviary and Hisuian Samurott, given how they are Sinnoh versions of Unova Pokemon, and I feel like they would be very fitting for his character to have. I will leave that for your interpretation. Did Paul went back in time to battle Volo, or did he learn from, you know, Unova Sinnoh relationship from Kogita, sorry, in the current day, and did he battle Enamorus? It would be the first fairy type he would meet, and given how Cynthia battled the Kami trio in Undella Town, there is a possibility for that. But anyways, now when Ash was in Alola during the course of Sun and Moon, I feel like Paul would yet again go to the places where Ash was, and Paul would now go to the Kalos region. So after 55 episodes of the first year of Pokemon Sun and Moon, ending with the Aether arc and the wedding of Kukui and Burnett, I feel like Paul at this point in time, he was in Geosange Town learning about the ultimate weapon, and I feel like he would have met Emma. I feel like Emma would have been an amazing character for Paul to meet, and he would meet Ilima before Ilima would return to the Melee school. And during this time, I feel like Paul would have benefited a lot from capturing Pokemon such as Meowstic, to be a parallel to Emma's Esper, and the Pangoro. I feel like Paul would rock a Pangoro really hard, and I think he would give a lot of challenge to Ilima, and maybe that's why Ilima wants to get Mega Kangaskhan as, you know, part of his training here in the region. So they would be Paul's rivals during the league circuit. And during the Necrozma arc, in the next season of Alola, I feel like Paul would have been in Dandemil Town, and he would meet AZ in the Frost Cavern, and he would learn about, you know, the myths and legends of the region. And I feel like Paul would have caught a Barbaracle and a Trevenant during his journey here. I feel like these are very fitting Pokemon for him to have. You have Trevenant based on the Yggdrasil, the Tree of Life, and, you know, Barbaracle, it kind of echoes Ash's Greninja in the water aspect and also the stealth aspect, so there you have it. Now, when it comes to the final season for Paul, during the Alola League, this would be, you know, before the Alola League or after the Alola League, because Ilima participated in the Kalos League, so this could be a Kalos League aftermath, when the Alola League takes place, where he would help Lumio City. He would probably meet Sina and Dexio, now being Sycamore's newest assistants since Halan is on a journey. And the Pokemon that I feel like Paul would have in this scenario are not particularly Kalos native Pokemon, because there are very few. I feel like Paul could benefit from having a Eatmore. I feel like Eatmore would be a very interesting Pokemon for him to have, because it's not something that you would particularly see, but he would benefit from it a lot. And as well as Beedrill. You could have a Mega Evolution arc where he wants to bond with Beedrill, and it's a cool nod to also the fact that, you know, Ash had a Butterfree. So this is the Kalos team that I would give Paul during Ash's run in Sun and Moon. Being of, you know, Eatmore, Beedrill, Barbaracle, Pangoro, Trevenant, and male Meowstic. Now, for Pokémon Journeys. Pokémon Journeys was a series that wanted to capitalize on nostalgia and the world-traveling aspect, which means that Ash and Go were not in Galar for all the time. So you know who was in Galar? That's right, it was Paul. Paul was in Galar all the way through. He probably got a sponsorship and an endorsement for the league due to being a very powerful trainer, and he trained a lot from a lot of people. And during the darkest day, since Ash and Go were in mainland Galar, I feel like during the end of the first season of Pokémon Journeys, Paul was in the Isle of Armor. He was training with Mustard and also Honey and every dojo student. He probably met Avery and Clara there. And it's a nice tie-in to the fact that, you know, Sinnoh got remakes during the Sword and Shield era. As for Paul's Pokemon, I feel like he would have benefited from getting a Poliwrath and a Grimmsnarl. These are Pokemon that I can see Paul training in the Tower of Waters and the Tower of Darkness. So continuing on with the next season of Pokémon Journeys, on its midway point no less, where Dawn and Chloe were helping Cresselia and Ash and Go were, you know, defending Darkrai from Team Rocket's Matori Matrix, I feel like this would have been the time where Paul finally went to mainland Galar, and he probably blitzed through the gyms. He went to, you know, Motostoke, Hammerlock, all that good stuff, and I feel like he probably had a training arc with Kabu, like how Liko and Roy had that one episode during Pokemon Horizons. So there you have it. During the darkest day, when the kids were in mainland Galar, Paul was in the Isle of Armor, and when the kids were not in Galar that much, Paul went to that said mainland. Which means that during the beginning of Season 3, since the other parts that I talked was the end of Season 1 and the middle of Season 2, in the beginning of Season 3, during the Arceus Chronicles, or the E-Trend special, as I like to call it, Paul was in the Crown Tundra, and he probably was helping Peony. But before that, I just want to say that, Paul he caught the Dracozolt given how Ash had a Dracovish, and he caught the Shiftry in the wild area because I think Shiftry is a very cool Pokemon. But yeah. So there you have it. I feel like Paul went to, the Crown Tundra, and before re-meeting Ash, he met Peony, another former champion, like Mustard, and he got a Cryogonal, because it's an Ice type that can learn Attract. It's very a tricky Pokemon, and he got an Araquanid, because I feel like, this Pokemon would have fitted him a lot. I don't have much to say on those regards, but yeah, which means that Paul's Galar team during Journeys, funny enough, it would have been Cryogonal, Dracozolt, Araquanid, Poliwrath, Shiftry, and Grimmsnarl. So 2 Waters, 2 Darks, an Ice and a Dragon. So yeah, and then he meets Ash, and Professor Oak does tell Ash that Paul was asked to be a gym leader. So the most likely scenario is that Paul is going to, be the gym leader of Viridian City, because Giovanni is not there anymore, and Agatha could not replace the guy forever. She probably retired given how Lance became the champion of Johto and Kanto. And Paul has 6 Pokemon that are ground type that would fit that role. And he could evolve his Ursaring to an Ursaluna to better fit that role. And as for Mega Evolution, besides Beedrill, Banette that I gave him here, he could train that for other Pokemon, primarily Aggron. So yeah, there you have it, folks. This is what I think that Paul was doing during his absence in the Pokemon anime. Let me know what you guys thought about it. Let me know in the comment section down below. Write your own ideas for what Paul was doing during this time. And make sure to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you another time, trainers. KuroBlitz out.